So I'm going to be a little bit late to this, but I just had to make a video about it still. While I was working on my 4 Nights video, I was reading the last chapter of Chainsaw Man, and I was blown away by how terrible it ended. I was actually keeping up with the manga every time a new chapter came out, and I gave my thoughts on the channel through my shorts. If you checked out my shorts, you noticed that I didn't have the last 2 chapters. This is because, for some reason, even though my short was just a couple of zoomed in images and parts of the manga, they copyright struck it. And that happened right before the final chapter came out. So I couldn't get my thoughts on the final chapter. Now, I'm going to change that because Chainsaw Man's ending was so awful and so disrespectful to the fans of this series that I can't help but go over it. Now, because of my copyright strike, I am still going to talk about what happened, but for safety reasons, instead of providing images from the actual Chainsaw Man manga, I'm going to use images from my new manga that I created called That Time I Became a Human Power Tool to Escape a Life of Extreme Poverty and Finally Get a Girlfriend. Specifically the very last chapter, unless I was to rewrite this to make it a much better ending, which, trust me, I have no problem doing. I feel like I shouldn't have to mention this, but just in case I do, if you don't want to be spoiled by the last few chapters of Chainsaw Man, you should probably click off. But if you care about spoilers, I don't understand why you clicked on this video in the first place. In the previous chapter, we had a big fight, and the last chapter ended with our main character, Benji, and the power tool dog Fido being eaten by a devil, and in order for them to survive, Fido sacrifices himself by consuming himself and basically tells Benji deuces. The idea was that this was supposed to be so Benji could live a good life without ever having become a human power tool, which is total bullshit because Benji's life was nothing before he became a human power tool. Now let's get to the final chapter because this is the aftermath of Fido eating himself and essentially erasing himself from existence. That way Benji never becomes a human power tool. We open back up in the shed from the first episode. Benji is still very sick. He has one eye. He's basically everything he was before him and Fido merged. He thought he only had a dream and hoped that he would have a better dream, like getting with girls or something. He even makes a comment that he wishes he had a pet dog. Then we basically fast forward to the start of the zombie devil, and all the same stuff somehow happens. And by same stuff, Benji literally gets stabbed through the heart. As he's dying, who comes to save him? Of all people, Powerful. No relation to Power from other manga. Powerful starts killing all the zombies, which makes no sense because where the hell did she come from in this timeline? In the previous timeline, she was never there. This feels so forced, and honestly, I think they brought Powerful back just because everyone loves Powerful. I'm just gonna call her Powie. Benji is still lying there, dying, so Powie comes over and saves him by making a contract with him. Now, instead of our favorite chainsaw dog, Benji is in a contract with Power. Then they get attacked, and who else but a controlling little girl pops up to rescue them and say that they now have to work as devil hunters. They're back in the office, and they're working as devil hunters, and there's a lot of dogs for some reason. I swear, I'm not making this up. This is what happens. First off, where's our favorite redhead? Why is it that she's a little girl? They go to hunt a monster together and Benji pulls out a chainsaw, which doesn't even make sense because if the chainsaw dog ate himself and erased his name from existence, chainsaws should not exist because chainsaw dog no longer exists in this world. So why is he even using a chainsaw? We get no answers for this, but what's worse is what happens next. I'm gonna finish this chapter before I get overly analytical. Benji sees high schoolers kick a soccer ball around and wishes he could have gone to school. Which, why didn't you, Benji? You'd rather be controlled by a little girl and hunt devils? He sees a girl trip and he reaches out and grabs her and stops her from falling. Who else is this girl but our favorite character from this entire act, Ashley? He saves her from falling and Ashley tells him, "Thank you, chainsaw person." Hearing that name, he suddenly has his heart thump, and we see inside his chest to where his favorite dog is actually his heart still. And I can't wait to call bullshit on this. Why the hell is his heart still the chainsaw dog? He is supposed to be erased from existence. How does he still exist? Later on, I thought, okay, maybe it's something like earlier when nuclear weapons didn't exist and America reinvented them. I thought maybe this would make sense for it to be kind of like that, but if that's true, then this isn't over because then chainsaw still exists. So everything that just happened in the last few chapters means nothing. Anyway, back to finishing this up. Benji is confused on why he was called Chainsaw Man, and it's because he literally had a chainsaw. That shouldn't have existed in the first place. She leaves to go back to playing soccer for some reason, even though she wasn't playing soccer. Then Powie tells Benji that she's hungry and that they should go get food. And they leave together too, I guess, and end up being devil hunters for the rest of their lives. There are just endless issues with this chapter alone because apparently this is as far as we get for the entire series. We don't get any answer answers for a lot of questions. There's so many unanswered questions for this entire thing. What happened to Akira? What happened to War Devil? We don't even get much of an explanation of what this contract is between Powie and Benji. And honestly, the chapter retcons itself, because if Powie saved Benji, why is the chainsaw dog still in his heart? There's no answers for anything. This is honestly why I can't imagine this is the ending. The problem is, though, that there's no confirmation that there's going to be an Act 3. In fact, there are some confirmations from certain sources that say that there's going to be no part 3. This is also just such a horrible end for the series, because how are you going to have such a great and interesting story and then all of a sudden just end in the worst possible way? It could have ended up worse, but honestly, it was just such a bad ending. I would have at least appreciated a actual bad ending if it wrapped everything up, because this just felt like it was trying to give fan service and give Benji what he wants, but also wrap everything up nice and quick. Honestly, the entire final fight of this whole series felt weird at moments, because there were times that it was so good and interesting, and then all of a sudden it just got boring. We got no extra content for any of the things that happened like this. That was all we got. We know nothing about Kobanai. We never got any kind of resolution to see if Rize is still alive or not, even though most of the internet thinks that she's dead. We didn't get the full backstory for what happened with Denji and his father. I know they briefly talked about it in a chapter, but they didn't really elaborate that much on it. And they laughed out a lot for Ashley. It's just so terrible. I mean, this literally feels like the author just tried to wrap things up so he can go ahead and move on to his next project. In Act 2, throughout the fight, there were some scenes that just felt like not a lot of effort was put into them. The chapters started to be no more than 15 pages. Every single chapter felt short. It feels like the author just kind of gave up on it and then just tried to wrap things up to move on to something else, which is crazy. With the traction that Chainsaw Man has gotten after the anime and the movie, there are a lot of fans for this, and manga readers are already pissed off at this. Imagine anime fans if they ever got to this point. Even in the universe, there are so many inconsistencies. If Chainsaw never existed, why is Control still around? Why is it not our favorite redhead and is just immediately a kid? What is even the point in having all these dogs and cats? It literally just feels like everything was shoved together to try to be like, all right, let's wrap this up. Another thing that I even thought about was when a devil gets eaten, sure, that devil like ceases to exist and they even forget about that devil, but the world doesn't just reset itself. That's what also makes no sense for this. Like, for example, in previous chapters, when like the nose devil, and I don't even remember the other one, but like when the nose devil gets eaten and everyone's noses disappear, the world didn't reset itself because all of a sudden everything changes because there were no noses. It's the same thing for this. Just because chainsaws don't exist, the timeline should have just continued, not reset itself all the way back to the beginning. If anyone wants to try to defend this ending, I invite you to in the comments, because I don't see how this was a good ending whatsoever. I don't see how this was even a good bad ending. I don't understand anything, and I think most of the internet doesn't too.